Welcome to the deep dive. Ever wonder how a company suddenly reports a huge financial hit, even when they're just trying to sell off a part of the business that isn't doing well?
Yeah, it's definitely not just about banking the cash from the sale. There's more to it.
Exactly. So today, we're diving into, well, a fascinating area. Impairment losses related to discontinued operations. We're going to unpack how companies handle assets they're planning to sell, especially when those assets lose value. It tells you a lot. But before we really get into the weeds, just a quick reminder for everyone listening. This deep dive, it's based on material from Farhat lectures.
That's right.
All the content, the examples we'll use, the explanations, it all comes from the great accounting resources over at farhatlectures.com.
Really comprehensive stuff there.
Definitely. So whether you're an accounting student, maybe studying for the CPA exam, or you're already a professional, you should check out the website. They've got extra practice questions, video lectures, lots of support to help reinforce what we talk about today.
A big thank you to Professor Farhat for providing this material for us to discuss.
Absolutely. So our mission today, let's untangle these accounting rules.
Okay.
We want you to really get how financial statements have to show the true current value of assets that are headed for sale. No overstatements, just transparency.
Right. Clarity is key. So maybe we should start with the basics. What exactly is an impairment loss?
Good starting point.
Well, in simple terms, it happens when an asset's carrying amount, that's its value on the company's books, the historical cost less depreciation is actually higher than its recoverable amount.
A recoverable amount, what does that mean in practice?
Recoverable amount is basically what the company expects to get back from the asset. It's the higher of either the fair value less costs to sell, or its value in use, essentially the future cash flows it can generate. For assets held for sale, we typically focus on fair value, less cost to sell.
Okay, let's try a quick example. Say an asset is on the books at $100,000. That's its carrying amount. But after looking closely, the company figures its recoverable amount, what they can actually get for it, or its future value, is maybe only $70,000. What happens then?
Well, that $30,000 difference, that's your impairment loss.
Oh, okay.
The asset is overvalued on the books by $30,000, and you have to recognize that loss right away. It's about facing the economic reality.
And there's an accounting principle behind this, right?
Exactly. It comes down to conservatism.
Conservatism.
Yeah, it's a core idea. You recognize losses as soon as you know about them. Don't wait. But gains, you only recognize those when they're actually certain or realized. It prevents companies from looking healthier than they really are.
Makes sense. So what kind of things actually cause these assets to lose value like that? Why do impairments happen?
Oh, it could be a number of things. Maybe rapid technology changes make older equipment almost worthless.
Okay.
Or big economic downturns that hit demand. Changes in laws or regulations can impact value too. Even just shifts in what customers want.
So lots of potential triggers.
Definitely. The main goal is always to make sure assets aren't sitting on the balance sheet at a value higher than they're truly worth.
Right. Now, you mentioned we're focusing specifically on discontinued operations today. How is that different from, say, just writing down a piece of machinery?
Good question. The basic idea comparing book value to recoverable value is similar. But when you decide to sell off an entire division or segment of your business, the rules for reporting it, especially the impairment part, get a bit more specific. That's what we're zeroing in on.
Okay. So before we dive into that specific impairment piece, maybe a quick refresher on discontinued operations reporting in general. What do we usually see on the income statement?
Sure. Typically, there are two main components people think of. First, you report the operating results of that component, its revenues, expenses, any gains or losses from its own operations during the period, and crucially, that's reported net of tax.
Net of tax. Got it. And the second thing?
The second is the gain or loss on the actual disposal of the segment. That gets reported in the year the sale happens, also net of tax.
Okay. Operations and disposal gain loss. Both net of tax.
But there's a third piece, and this is often the tricky one, and it's our focus. The impairment loss itself. This comes into play before the sale might even happen.
So this happens when it's just planned for sale.
Exactly. It's recognized when a company decides, okay, we're selling this division and classifies it as held for sale. Let's say that happens in year one, but maybe the sale doesn't actually go through until year 2 or even year 3. At the end of each reporting period, while it's still held for sale, so at the end of year 1, in this case, you have to check something.
Check what?
You check if the recoverable value of the whole division is less than its carrying amount on the books. If it is, boom, you have to recognize an impairment loss right then. in year one.
Even though it hasn't been sold?
Even though it hasn't been sold.
So how do you figure out that loss amount?
It's the difference between the division's book value at that point and its estimated fair value minus the costs you expect to incur to sell it.
Okay, so book value versus, like, the net amount you expect to pocket from the sale.
Pretty much. Let's say a division has a book value of $10 million, but you estimate its fair market value is $8.5 million, and it'll cost about $500,000 in commissions and legal fees to sell it.
So fair value less cost to sell is $8 million.
Exactly. Since that $8 million is less than the $10 million book value, you've got a $2 million impairment loss to recognize immediately, even before the sale.
Wow, okay. What if the value changes again after you've recorded that loss, but before the sale? Like, what if it drops further or maybe even recovers a bit?
Good point. If the estimated fair value less cost to sell drops further in a subsequent period, you just recognize an additional impairment loss. Keep writing it down.
Makes sense. What if it goes up?
Now, if the value increases later, you can recognize a gain, but, and this is a big but, you can only recognize that gain up to the amount of the impairment losses you previously recorded on that specific asset or division.
Ah, so you can reverse previous losses, but you can't go above the original carrying amount before any impairment was taken.
Essentially, yes. If you wrote it down by $5 million total, you can only write it back up by a maximum of $5 million, even if the fair value jumps way higher. You're restoring value, not creating new profit beyond the original cost basis adjusted for normal operations before it was held for sale.
You know, something that always seems to surprise people is depreciation. What happens with depreciation once something is classified as held for sale?
That's a great point, and yeah, it often catches people off guard. Assets classified as held for sale are no longer depreciated or amortized.
Even if they're still being used?
Even if they're technically still operating while waiting for a buyer. The logic is depreciation is about allocating the cost of an operating asset over its useful life. Once management decides to dispose of it, it's no longer viewed that way. Its value recovery is expected through sale, not continued use.
So changes in value are captured by impairment, not depreciation.
Precisely. Which leads us back to that core measurement rule we touched on. A component held for sale must be measured at the lower of two things: its current carrying amount, book value, or its fair value, less cost to sell.
Lower of carrying amount, or fair value, less cost to sell. And cost to sell, that's just the direct costs.
Yep. Things directly tied to the sale transaction itself. Legal fees, broker commissions, closing costs, that kind of stuff. Not general overhead.
Okay, I think we need an example to really nail this down.
Agreed. Let's use a case study. How about FitnessW? Let's say they decide on March 31st, year one, to get rid of their cycling division because it's just been losing money consistently.
Okay, FitnessW cycling division. Decision on March 31, year one. What were the numbers?
At that decision date, the division's carrying value, its book value, was $5 million.
$5 million book value.
But after doing your homework, they estimated the fair value less the cost to sell was only $3 million.
Okay, so right away.
Right away, you see a gap. $5 million book value, $3 million recoverable amount. That means an initial gross impairment loss of $2 million needs to be recognized for year one.
$2 million impairment loss.
Yeah.
And let's set the timeline. Decision March 31, year one. When did they actually sell it?
Let's say the sale didn't happen until quite a bit later, August 31st of year two, and they ended up selling it for $2.8 million.
Sold August 31, year two for $2.8 million. Okay. Any other info we need?
Yeah, a couple more things. The division kept losing money while they waited for the sale. Let's say it was losing $250,000 per month during year two, right up until the sale.
$250K loss per month in year two. Ouch.
And we need the tax rate. Let's use 21% for both years. Also, FitnessW's income from its continuing operations, everything else besides cycling, was $6 million in year one and $6.5 million in year two.
Okay, got all the pieces. Let's walk through the reporting, starting with year one.
Right. So for year one, even though the decision was in March, we need to report the cycling division's operating results for the entire year, January 1st to December 31st.
A full year's activity.
Yep. Let's say after adding up all its revenues, $18 million, and subtracting all its costs, COGS, freight, commissions, advertising, insurance, salaries, everything, the division had a gross operating loss of $2.9 million for year one.
$2.9 million operating loss.
Yeah.
But we report it net of tax, right?
Exactly. Since it's a loss, it creates a tax benefit or saving. So you take the $2.9 million loss and multiply it by 1.21. That gives you a net of tax operating loss of $2,291,000 to report.
$2,291,000 net operating loss from the discontinued operation.
Okay.
What else for year one?
The impairment loss. Remember, it wasn't sold in year one.
Ah, right. The $2 million difference we found earlier.
Yes. That $2 million gross impairment loss also needs to be reported net of tax. So $2 million times 1.21 gives us a net impairment loss of $1,580,000.
Okay, so two separate loss lines for the discontinued operation in year one.
Correct.
So how would the bottom part of FitnessW's year one income statement look?
You'd start with income from continuing operations, $6,000. Then you'd show the discontinued operations section. First line. Loss from operation of discontinued operation, net of tax benefit, showing $2,291,000.
Okay.
Second line right below it, loss from impairment of discontinued operation, net of tax benefit, showing $1,580,000.
Got it. So the total impact from discontinued ops is the sum of those two.
And the final net income for FitnessW in year one would be the $6 million minus those two losses, which comes out to $2,129,000. It clearly isolates the ongoing business from the part being sold off.
Very clear presentation. Now let's move to year two. What happens then?
Okay, year two. The division operated for 8 months before it was sold, right? January 1st to August 31st.
And it was losing $250,000 a month.
Exactly. So $250,000 times 8 months is a $2 million gross operating loss for that period in year two.
Net of tax again.
Net of tax again. $2 million times 1.21 is another $1,580,000 operating loss from discontinued ops to report in year two.
Okay, that's the operating loss for the 8 months. Now what about the actual sale? It sold for $2.8 million.
Right. Now, what do we compare that $2.8 million sale price to?
Not the original $5 million book value. It has to be the value after the year one impairment, right? The written down value.
Perfect. The carrying value at the start of year two was $3 million. The $5 million original minus the $2 million impairment.
So $3 million book value sold for $2.8 million. That's another loss.
Yep. A gross loss on disposal of $200,000, $3 million minus $2.8 million.
And let me guess. Net of tax.
You got it.
Yeah.
$200,000 times 1.21 equals a $158,000 net loss on disposal.
Okay, so in year two, we have the operating loss for 8 months, and we have the loss on the final sale. Do we need another impairment loss calculation for year two?
Good question. No, because it was actually sold in year two, you don't report a separate impairment loss for that year. The loss on disposal effectively captures that final adjustment to the sale price. If, hypothetically, it hadn't been sold by the end of year two, then yes, you would have had to do another impairment test at December 31, year two. Compare the $3 million carrying value to the then current fair value less cost to sell.
Got it. So let's put together the year two income statement presentation.
All right. Starts with income from continuing operations, $6,500,000.
Okay.
Then the discontinued operations section. First line, loss from operating the discontinued business, net of tax benefit, showing $1,580,000.
That's the 8 months of losses.
Right. Second line, loss from sale of discontinued operation, net of tax benefit, showing $158,000.
Loss on the actual sale.
Exactly. So FitnessW's net income for year two would be the $6.5 million minus those two losses, totaling $4,762,000.
Okay, that example really clarifies how all the pieces fit together over time.
Yeah, hopefully shows the flow. So kind of wrapping this up, what's the big picture here? Why is this impairment accounting so important for discontinued operations?
That's the main takeaway.
Well, it really boils down to accurate financial reporting. These impairment rules, they force companies to recognize the diminished value of a segment when it happens, or at least when the decision to sell crystallizes that value loss.
Even if the cash hasn't changed hands yet.
Precisely. It ensures the balance sheet isn't carrying assets at inflated values just because a sale hasn't been finalized. It prevents investors from being misled about the real economic situation of the company. It's about reflecting reality now, not just future hopes.
That makes a lot of sense. It provides a much clearer picture. So, thinking about this, what does understanding these rules really mean for someone analyzing a company? How does knowing about impairment losses and discontinued ops empower you, the listener, to maybe see beyond just the headline revenue or profit numbers?
That's a great question to ponder.
How does it help you truly grasp the underlying financial story, maybe spot hidden issues, or even appreciate a company's transparency? Something to think about.
Definitely.
And if this deep dive has made you curious, if you want to explore these accounting principles further, remember farhatlectures.com. You can find more practice, video lectures, detailed support there to really solidify what we've discussed.
Great resource for digging deeper.
Absolutely. So good luck with your studies, whatever they may be, and stay safe out there.